Is your once beautiful clear lake green with harmful algae blooms? Don't add to the problem by using chemicals to treat the symptoms. There is a natural solution. Chemicals kill, but they can leave your lake worse off each year. In this presentation, you'll hear from EverBlue Lakes founder and president John Tucci on how best to experience chemical-free solutions for harmful algae blooms in lakes. He has pioneered the concept that conventional approaches to lake management, including herbicides, alum, and dredging, are not sustainable and can even be detrimental to the long-term health and recreational quality of a lake. John is a U.S. patent holder for Air Force microporous ceramic diffuser technology and the driving force behind smart watershed management technology, Bioblast, and Phosphorus Harvester technology. Under John's leadership, EverBlue is committed to saving lakes.
Our journey at EverBlue started more than 15 years ago when my own lake was so choked out with weeds, muck, and what I didn't know at the time, but toxic blue-green algae that me and my toddler daughter, when I put her in for her first swim in this lake cottage that we bought, couldn't even swim off our own property because the water was just so disgusting. And, as president of the Lake Association at the time, I went out looking for alternatives. And quite frankly, I didn't find any natural alternatives to what we were currently doing, which was just dousing the lake with chemicals and hoping the lake got better. That journey to find and implement alternatives has led us to EverBlue Lakes today. And what I'd like to do is take you through a very fast-paced, we're all short on time, so a very fast-paced overview and introduction to our perspective and also some details on how we are doing what we are doing with these natural strategies in lakes all over the country. So let's start out with our mission. And one thing that surprised me 15 years ago, and it still surprises me today, is that if you look out into the lake treatment world, you won't find, I don't think, another company that has the goal to make lakes healthier in their mission statement. They're there to treat lakes, they're there to treat problems, to make the homeowners feel better about what they're seeing in the lake, but their mission doesn't include making the lake healthier. Our mission is all about making lakes healthier using strategies that solve the underlying causes of the weed, muck, and algae problems, because what we find is that while it's not perfect for the most part, when you give a lake what it needs to stay healthy, the weed, muck, and algae problems that drive us all crazy as lake homeowners start to disappear naturally. So one caveat to that we should all keep in mind is that we try to be as fast as we can in turning around these lakes, but we're not about quick fix solutions. And we're not also about solutions that only solve the problem for people while not taking into account the other stakeholders of our lakes, which are the fish and the birds and the turtles and all the aquatic life that make a lake a great and important ecosystem for our communities and around the planet. So from this kind of humble beginning of trying to fix my own lake in Southwest Michigan, we've grown quite a bit. And so this is kind of a partial list of the projects that we've worked on over the last 10 years. And these are recreational lakes, and we're particularly proud of the fact that over the last 2 years, we have implemented what we believe is one of the largest, if not the largest, lake aeration system in the country in one of Vermont's impaired lakes, Lake Carmi in Vermont. We have also initiated a pilot on New Jersey's largest lake that's going very well, Lake Hopatcong, and we have quite literally in one season turned around one of Connecticut's biggest lakes, Lake Poconopaug in East Hampton, Connecticut. So what we do does work. It's not a miracle cure, but we've got a lot of successful projects and a lot of happy clients that are working with us today that started with us 5, 10, and some even more than 10 years ago that continue to use our methods and tools to keep their lakes healthy and solve these problems. Along the way, we have also worked with a number of drinking water reservoirs where our technologies are being used to actually clean the water before it comes into the water treatment plant, which ends up saving the treatment plant operators a lot of money, but more importantly, allows them to deliver a better quality and safer drinking water product to the residents of their communities. So we think we're on the right track. We certainly have a long way to go. You know, the reality is that the world is not getting any better for our lakes. In fact, the crisis is more than acute in terms of the impact that these harmful algal blooms are having on our lake communities. And this is a sign that's popping up more and more every year on more and more lakes. 2019, multiple lakes in the Northeast, many lakes in the Northeast were closed for recreational activity, including Lake Hopatcong in New Jersey and multiple other lakes in New Jersey. And every day on my Google feed, I get news stories from around the world where lake communities are closing their lakes, warning people to keep their dogs out of the lake, their kids out of the lake. So this problem's not going away. And in fact, blue-green algae is stepping up its game with respect to its efforts to take over our lakes and turn our water into something that we all don't want. Our perspective is very clear, and that is the conventional approaches that have been used to stop harmful algal blooms are largely failing. Not always, but largely failing. And we've seen enough evidence and have enough experience to know that it's time for new thinking and a new approach. So before we take into that new approach that we favor, I'd like to take you through some of the facts and research that led us to this conclusion. So first, let's start with really the de facto approach for trying to treat lakes and get rid of algae in lakes, and that's chemical algaecides. And the problem, quite frankly, with chemical algaecides, that killing algae with chemicals actually releases the algal toxins into the water faster and at a higher volume, and it recycles the nutrients that fuel the next bloom. And that often can happen within days or even within weeks, or even within days of a chemical algaecide treatment. So you don't have to take our word for this. There's a lot of proof to back up this case, including multiple peer-reviewed articles. This one is from JARRA, and as we share these slides, if you want them, we can share these slides and you can have these links at the end of the presentation. The net of this article is that chemical algaecides, particularly copper-based algaecides, are bad for people. There is residual toxicity, not tremendous toxicity, but there is a risk associated with that toxicity for people. Very bad for fish in terms of the impact they have on the ecosystem for fish, toxic in the lake bed, and the worst part is they're good for blue-green algae in the long run. So chemical algaecides kill the blue-greens initially. They also kill a lot of the other beneficial biota that you want in the lake. And unfortunately, blue-green algae has evolved the mechanisms to bounce back faster than the good algae and the good microfauna that we actually want in our lakes. So by using chemical algaecides, you're actually guaranteeing that your lake is going to be a better environment for blue-green algae down the road than it is even today. Another substantiation here, the EPA in their own research has basically confirmed the same thing. Copper may also be toxic to aquatic life. and algaecides lead to cell breaking and the release of more toxins in the water than if you just did nothing. So from our view, algaecides are certainly not a long-term or sustainable solution to solving harmful algal blooms in lakes. What about the more intensive, quote, restoration technologies, typically alum and dredging? So our perspective on these technologies is that they basically do what they advertise. So alum will reduce phosphorus in a lake in the short run, and dredging certainly will remove nutrients from the lake bed. However, they're one-time events. The cycle of nutrient overloading in lakes and algal growth and algal death and algal regrowth is a continuous 24/7, almost 365-day-a-year process in lakes, as we're now starting to learn that even in winter with ice cover, blue-green algae is preparing itself to take over the lake in the spring. So these solutions are limited. They're limited in the fact that they're event-based and you do them once, and they're limited and then expect a long-term result from it against a continuous process. And they're limited in the fact that most lake communities just simply can't afford to do alum or dredging. They don't have the funds necessary to do these strategies right. And so two things happen. You end up with a lake in a cycle of decline that starts with chemical treatment for an algae problem. That also kills not only the bad algae, but the beneficial organisms go into decline. Nutrients are released back into the lake as a result of this treatment, and that just fuels more severe blooms. At the same time, within the lake community, we're finding lake communities go into a similar cycle of decline. They chemically treat the lake. More severe blooms occur year after year. They get frustrated. They start looking for alternatives. They study alum and dredging. Unfortunately, they find out that it's going to cost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to fix their lake. They fail to get that funding, and they're left back at the top of the cycle where the only tool in their toolbox is to chemically treat. The other thing that's going on in this cycle of decline, which isn't a bad thing in and of itself, is we do see lake communities starting to talk about watershed management, which is good, but we're not seeing them able to follow through on actually implementing watershed management solutions that could help them break this cycle. So our intent with our approach is to bring a process and bring solutions to the table that help lake communities break this self-defeating harmful algal bloom cycle. So we're working to deliver a natural, continuous lake restoration process at a cost that communities can afford. So we want to match the continuous process that nature has, or that we're delivering to these lakes in terms of this nutrient loading cycle being a continuous process. Every time it rains, every time someone puts fertilizer on their lawn, well, we want a restoration system in the lake that is working 24/7 and 365 as well to combat that problem. So our objective here is to reduce the nutrients that drive excess weed and algae growth, clean up the compost pile at the bottom of the lake, which is the storehouse in many lakes of nutrients that are the first source of nutrients to feed harmful algal blooms. And then finally, deliver a healthier lake, typically for certainly more money than what it costs to do a chemical herbicide, algaecide and herbicide program, but at a tiny fraction of the cost of alum or dredging. That's our value proposition in essence. And of course, like any good science-based firm, we've developed an integrated model for how we do this that will take you through the sequence of the basic tools and strategies that we use. But what I want to emphasize here at the start is we have a little bit different perspective on the oxygen problem in lakes. many lake professionals and even lake scientists will talk about nutrient problems and watershed loading and internal loading of nutrients. And they kind of brush aside the fact that almost all of these impaired lakes are severely oxygen deprived. In our world, oxygen deprivation, a lake without oxygen, is a lake that has a fundamental impairment that needs to be fixed and corrected. So for lakes that need this, for lakes that are sick and are out of oxygen, often circulation and oxygenation is the non-negotiable starting point for getting that lake on a path of continuous restoration. Why? Because when you oxygenate a lake, you actually set up, and I won't get into too much detail on this, but you actually set up a healthier cycle in the lake that prevents nutrients from releasing from the lake bottom sediments to fuel harmful algal growth. And actually over time, at least with the technologies we use, has been proven to eat up or biodegrade that compost pile of nutrients at the bottom of the lake that is one of the prime sources of lake impairment for both weed and algae growth. So aeration technology is often a key part of the restoration process that we bring to the table for a lake. The second key strategy is biological, we call biological acceleration. When nature has a mess, most of the time nature sends in bacteria to do the work of cleaning up that mess and decomposing that waste product into something different or something better for the environment. We've developed that same strategy for lakes. We call it Bioblast, where we're able to isolate, identify, and create a formulation of the right bacteria or probiotic treatment for your lake that puts nature's best cleaners to work, both in the water and at the compost pile at the bottom of the lake. And then finally, what we have found is, as good as these first two tools are, for some lakes and many lakes that have a watershed loading problem as well as an internal loading problem, they're not enough. And our lake customers and lake communities need to start looking very seriously at nutrient filtration strategies that include what we call smart watershed management tools, or cleaning the water of the nutrients and sediment before it enters the lake. And now we're in development with Floating Islands International of an in-lake combination of the floating islands wetland effect and literal phosphorus harvesting, or being able to pull phosphorus out of the water into an absorptive media and removing it permanently from the lake. So we'll talk a little bit more in detail about this model and these three strategies, but we also find that models can be confusing and complicated, and many of our lake communities, as you go back to communicate with your peers and folks in your communities, need to have a simpler way to think about lake restoration. So we've boiled it down to three things. There's only three things you need to know about lake management and really making a change in the way you think about lake restoration and lake management for your lake. Those three things are nutrient reduction, and nutrient reduction. If any strategy or any dollar that you're spending on your lake, if you can't measure the impact on reducing either the nutrients in the lake bed itself or stop new nutrients from getting to the lake from that strategy, then that strategy is not an investment in the future of your lake. It's just an expense that's killing weeds or algae in the short run, but not making your lake healthier, or in most cases, making your lake less healthy over time. So the main message I would like everyone to take away from this webinar is every lake community needs to start thinking about nutrient reduction and building a strategy to get measurable results on reducing the nutrient budget for your lake. That means the nutrients in the water and at the sediment already, and stopping the new stuff from coming to the lake in the first place. So That's our perspective. To deliver on that perspective, we've developed 4 key tools that I've already referenced: Air Force Lake Aeration, Bioblast Biological Treatment, this toolbox of smart watershed management tools that are incredibly simple when you see them in a few slides. And we're now working on what we believe will be a breakthrough technology around phosphorus harvesting by leveraging some very interesting chemistry along with floating treatment wetlands. That's our toolbox as of today. The other thing that we bring to the table, because we operate almost exclusively on a performance-based contracting approach with our clients, we're always looking for the next better natural solution to get better results for our customers, because the better result we produce, the longer our customers stay with us, and they keep the contracts in force. So we believe in putting our money where our mouth is. So we've tried to be a pioneer in the industry in a performance-based contracting approach that that makes us a partner in restoring your lake. So we have to perform in order to get fully paid for our work. So let's talk about aeration. Aeration, I think, is probably the least understood and most misunderstood tool in the lake and pond management business. And it's probably one of the most misused tools. This is our bread and butter, and what's different about our approach to aeration is, one, it's scalable for large lakes. Just because an aeration technology can be installed in a 1 acre or ½ acre backyard pond does not mean, and I can tell you this from experience, that technology is fit for use or will do the job in a 50, 100, 200, 500, 1,000 acre lake. We have equipment that's built for that job, and we've proven it over dozens of customers. The second thing about our aeration technology is that it's been proven independently to not only put oxygen in the water. That's easy. Even a fountain can do that. What's hard is actually delivering oxygen all the way to the lake bottom sediments so that you can stimulate the biological process that allows that compost at the bottom to be biodegraded and literally eaten up by nature's best cleaners. And finally, we've developed a technology, despite its scalability, that's aesthetically appropriate and extremely quiet for busy residential lake settings. This is an example of one of our units aerating a 500-acre lake in Connecticut, right on a recreational beach area. There is a multi-unit condo literally 70 feet, maybe 85 feet from this building across the street, where residents look out over this lake and can hear people talking at the shoreline, yet they're not complaining about our system. What does scalability look like, if Zoom will allow? This is that same lake in Connecticut, and this is a 250 acre section of this large lake, Lake Pocatapog in Connecticut. And those circles you can see in the lake there, those are our diffusers treating this area. Some of them are almost a mile away from shore. This system, which covers 500 acres, and involved over 40 miles of 25 miles of airline, we were able to install and get that system running in less than 2 weeks last summer. So we know how to aerate big lakes, and we know how to manage that technology for the long run, as most of our customers are on long year annual service or even lease contracts that require us to stay with the program year after year after year. So Bioblast, everybody, you can go on the internet and find hundreds of products that are bacteria-based for cleaning up mostly ponds, but they also some advertise lakes. The concept is right. These are nature's best cleaners. we found in our work that the execution of the concept is not so easy. And specifically, it's very difficult to get a result if you're putting a few tens of pounds of pre-manufactured powder or a few hundreds of gallons of a pre-manufactured liquid into a lake. So we've developed a different approach that, again, is scalable to large lakes, delivers orders of magnitude more beneficial treatment than off-the-shelf formulations. So a typical bioblast treatment for one of our lakes is 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 gallons in a treatment that we're able to deliver in a few day period at a cost of pennies per gallon per treatment. This is what Bioblast looks like. We actually mobilize and bring these portable, in most of the time, in water, flexible tanks to the lake, fill them up with your lake water, put our formulation in, brew out the bacteria in a time-based approach, starting overnight and then on this rebrew cycle. And we are quite literally activating and brewing a treatment product using your lake water, which customizes which bacteria in our formula wake up and are ready to go to work in your water, and then deliver it to the lake with these specialized boats that can hold 500-gallon tanks and deliver a payload of 4,000 gallons of treatment or 4,000 pounds of treatment into your lake on every trip. So it's not the easiest way to treat a lake. And certainly if pouring 100 pounds of pre-manufactured powder worked as good, we would do that because we could make a lot more money just dumping 100 pounds of powder than spending 3 days putting 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 gallons of treatment in your lake. But because we're results-based and we're performance contract-based, we get paid only if we deliver a result. And unfortunately for us, this is the best way and virtually the only way that we have found to get a measurable result on large lakes with biological treatment. So that's why we do it. Third, smart watershed management. This is a very simple concept. It means clean the water as best you can before it hits the lake. What's different about our approach? Well, first, this does not replace the need for a comprehensive watershed management strategy. Every lake needs that. Every lake community needs to be looking at the bigger picture and changing the way we use land around the lakes. The problem is that that's very difficult and it's a very long-term challenge to make any headway and results on that broader watershed management challenge and strategy. So we've developed some tools for use in the meantime that focus on last mile, or really more accurately, last several hundred feet filtration solutions for small storm drains or moderate-sized storm drains and small inlets coming into the lake that are delivering these pollutants every time it rains. Our smart watershed program also includes a lot of the education that many lake communities have already done about what not to do around a lake, like blow leaves into the lake or burn leaves at the shore of the lake and blow the ashes into the lake. So it has that component too, but mostly what we're talking about in terms of actual implemented tools and techniques are these filtration strategies to clean the water from overland drains before it gets to the lake. And the idea is get some results on stopping these pollutants from hitting your lake while you're working on the larger scale watershed effort to really sustainably fix your lake and your lake community. So here's a couple of simple examples. This is a dry well that we built on the end of a storm drain entering a lake. So instead of that drain just dumping water free flow into the lake, it actually dumps the water into this filtration pit that we've got multiple levels of filtration materials and media built into. And the idea is that the water goes in, gets clean, and then makes its way into the lake at a much slower rate with cleaner water. This is a more a temporary but a more radical approach that we used on a lake where this is the first stage of quite literally using these filter sock technology to turn a straight flowing large storm drain into a small detention basin so that the pollutants could filter out at least to some degree before flowing through the filter and even over the filter during a large event. And the second stage of these projects is to, once we get some experience with a particular application and confirm that it's designed right, we then cover over these socks with riprap stone, large stone, so that it looks a little better and actually is, the stone actually holds it in place against larger storm events and creates a more permanent or durable filtration system. Simple stuff. And in fact, everything we know about what we call smart watershed management, we learn from the best engineers on the planet, which are the beaver. And in fact, if you're curious, there's a great book out there called Eager, which will, in a very fun read, teach you pretty much everything that we've learned over the last 15 years about how to be good small E engineers for watershed management around your lake. So the book is called Eager. I believe the author's name is Ben Goldfarb. So finally, our last strategy, which, fair warning, is not ready for prime time. It's actually, we've been 2 years into testing of trying to develop a viable phosphorus harvesting, economically and logistically viable phosphorus harvesting technology for lakes. That research has led us to this latest iteration of that project this summer, where we will be creating a specialized version of this active floating treatment wetland that's got not only the floating island matrix material that cleans the water biologically, but will be outfitted with a flow channel that will be specially designed to push 500 gallons of water a minute through a variety of medias that we're testing that are specific, have specific chemistries for absorbing or pulling phosphorus out of the water. So we're in partnership with Floating Islands International on this, and the idea is that we're combining active floating treatment wetlands with some very innovative absorptive phosphorus media chemistries to literally try to pull tens or even hundreds of pounds of phosphorus a year out of our customers' lakes and get it completely out of the system. So we've got a lot of data. Most of our all of our lakes in Michigan have been independently evaluated and studied by a third party, highly qualified PhD-led limnology firm. We've got lots of data on the fact of how these technologies work, how well they work. We've got data on cases where they didn't work so well and why. So we've got tons of data to show that what we're doing has validity, not always perfect, and we use that data to continuously improve. Likewise, the large Lake Pocatapog 500-acre lake in Connecticut is being independently evaluated by a third-party limnology firm. The pilot program in Lake Hopatcong is being independently evaluated. The project on Lake Carmi in Vermont is being independently evaluated by the state of Vermont and the University of Vermont. So I'm not going to go through all that data with you. What I'm going to show you is the sizzle here of what our customers are saying and what results look like to the human eye when we implement these strategies. So, and if you'd like more on the data, we're happy to have that follow-up conversation with you as part of the follow-up to this webinar. So this is Devil's Lake in Oregon, one of our furthest afield projects that we've done with the Devil's Lake Watershed Improvement District, affectionately known as Dillwood. And Devil's Lake was a notorious blue-green algae lake in Oregon. It was a lake that was on the list of lakes to avoid in Oregon for many, many years. We worked with them and their science team to develop a custom engineered aeration system that, based on the data, in this case, is only aerating about 100-acre zone of this 800-acre lake. But because of the science base and engineering base we use, they have not had a harmful algal bloom since implementing the system in 2018. And you can just kind of see the difference in, before after water clarity shot that's typical of, and they're also tracking the results, and those results are online. This is Lake Pocatapog in Connecticut, 500 acres, one of Connecticut's largest lake, closed in 2019, like many lakes in the Northeast, from July through October. We implemented the system. It was a whirlwind process of making a first presentation in the fall of 2019 and having a system in the water and running before the end of June in 2020. And even though we were a few weeks later than we wanted to be in getting that system up and running, last summer was the first summer in over a decade where they had no beach closures as a result of harmful blue-green algae blooms. And this lake, we did a very large-scale lake aeration system in their 2 deep basins and an aggressive bioblast treatment program. And then finally, just a stark visual example. This is Grand Lake St. Mary's in Ohio. It's a 13,000-acre lake. Top 5 most impaired water bodies in the country for blue-green algae. This is an 8-acre pilot area that we worked with them to develop a strategy for, and you can see the difference between the treated area and the non-treated area. Now, again, fair truth in advertising here. This is not the Bahamas yet. There's a long way to go, and this is, this area has not yet reached the goal in this lake of being swimmable on a daily basis through the summer, but it's a lot closer than the rest of the lake. And we're working with them now in the next years of the program to figure out how do we take this to the next level so that we can possibly create an 8-acre oasis that people can use and swim in a 13,000-acre lake that has been largely unusable except for fishing for the last 20 years. So that's what we're about. That's what we're trying to do with these technologies. And, we've had a lot of experience working with communities on multiple different levels all around the country.
To learn more about chemical-free solutions from EverBlue Lakes, visit their website or give them a call.